Samsung Galaxy M11 is not too impressive on specs, but maybe you should buy it. Here's why. I am Devatan and you're watching Tech Aisle. Let's begin. So starting off with the design is actually pretty good. Of course, this is not by any means premium. It is a polycarbonate bag, aka plastic bag. But that has been the trend in 2020, right? Plastic bag phones. And this is a matte surface, so the fingerprints will be kept to the minimum. This is actually very well built. You have the triple camera setup and the fingerprint scanner on the back. The fingerprint scanner, it is not very consistent. Like sometimes it is very slow, other times it unlocks very quickly. But that can be solved by a little margin if you register more than one fingerprint. It also has face unlock, which was decently fast, and that is done by the 8 megapixel rear camera located in the punch hole. And that punch hole, the punch hole actually gives the phone a modern feel. That is so good. I really appreciate Samsung for bringing that punch hole display onto the lower price point. And completing the overview, we have the headphone jack at the top and the single bottom firing speaker, and of course the Type-C charging cable. The quality from the headphone jack was only decent. It is not something that you would consider great. And talking about the bottom firing speaker, it does get loud, yes, granted, but at the highest volume, the quality of the sound is not very pleasing. A couple of things before we move into the screen. The ambient light sensor, which controls the amount of brightness of your screen when kept on auto brightness, that was a little bit sharp than I would like it to be. It kept the screen at a higher brightness than what was suitable for the environment. And another huge bummer is that there is no haptic engine on this phone, so you won't get any type of haptic feedback when you're using this device. And that brings us to the screen. Screen is sort of a mixed bag. It has some good things and some not so good things. So let's talk about the good things. The punch hole, as I discussed, that's so good. Physically, it is not a small punch hole or anything. It is quite big. It also doesn't have much bezel, so that's good. And finally, the color rendering is also quite decent. But the good, unfortunately, ends there. So let's talk about the bad. So starting with the resolution and the panel, it is only a PLS TFT display, and that too 720p. That's a lot of letters and numbers, but what does it actually mean in practical usage? Not so good. So let's begin with PLS TFT. PLS TFT is very similar to IPS LCD, but PLS TFT is tuned by Samsung themselves. So the PLS TFT in itself is not very bad, but the problem is that if you pay a little bit more, you get even Samsung phones with even AMOLED 1080p displays. So that's very poor. Samsung should not have done it. Samsung either should have given us a 1080p PLS TFT or IPS LCD display, or at least an AMOLED display. Not so good from Samsung. So the PLS TFT is actually quite comparable to IPS LCD, but along with that you also get the disadvantages of IPS LCD, and those are poor viewing angles and rainbowing at certain angles. And being 720p, the details and sharpness are lacking. So are you going to notice the resolution being 720p? Well, if you're coming from 1080p, obviously you are going to notice that. That is going to be prominent. But if you're coming from 720p display, I don't think you would. But again, Samsung shouldn't have done that. No. Okay, so the performance. Let's talk. So the M11 is powered by, wait for it, the Snapdragon 450. For a starting price of 10,499, that is unacceptable. There are competitors like Redmi Note 9, which offers MediaTek Helio G85 if you pay for rupees 500 more. Then there is the Realme 5i, which offers the Snapdragon 665 for again rupees 500 more. If performance is your main aim, then just pause the video and go to the very ending where I will be discussing the alternatives. This is simply not enough for performance-based heavy task, but then you may not be a performance-based heavy task user. So are you going to notice in practical usage in like scrolling through the web or something like that? Well, I did notice micro stutters, frame drops, and even blackouts while surfing the web or scrolling through the web. By the way, there's a 3GB, 32GB variant, so there'll be a tiny bit of performance improvement in the 4GB, 64GB, but it is not going to be massive. Besides, the storage is also only eMMC 5.1, which means that the time to open a file or save a file will be slower than usual. So yeah, don't buy this phone if performance is your main aim. Sorry for interrupting, but if you like this content, I'd be hugely appreciated if you could hit that like button. And if you're new here, I make technology videos every Wednesday at 4 p.m. So just consider subscribing and hitting the bell icon. Thank you and enjoy the rest of the video. So this whole review has not been going well for the Samsung Galaxy M11, but can pull things back in the later half of the video. Let's see. Let's talk about the camera. Here, if you read the hardware specs, you might think that this phone is garbage, but not quite. It has a triple camera system consisting of a 13 megapixel primary sensor, an 8 megapixel ultra-wide sensor and a 2 megapixel depth sensor. For selfies, it has an 8 megapixel front camera. Despite having not the best hardware, it still puts out decent images. The post-processing that Samsung has done is actually quite good. I have done a dedicated camera review of the Samsung Galaxy M11. The link for that which should pop up somewhere here. But if you don't want to watch that, just take this conclusion. It is very good in daylight, but horrible in low light. So coming to the battery, the M11 has a very good 5000 mAh battery. On moderate use, it lasted me easily a day and a half. Remember that the Snapdragon 450 is only a 40nm chipset, unlike the 7 and 8nm chipset of today. So the battery efficiency will be a bit on the lower side. If you are a heavy user, then you might find yourself looking for a charger before the day ends, and for that Samsung has provided a 15-watt charger. Samsung continues its streak of good things with the software. The Samsung Galaxy M11 runs on One UI 2.0 core on top of Android 10. So that is really good. But being the core version of One UI 2.0, you will be missing out on some features, and those are features like night mode, single take feature, etc. But the positive side of One UI is that you don't get much ads compared to something like MIUI or even Realme to some extent. There was a bit of bloatware, but that was easily uninstallable. The software is good, which doesn't have much ads. So, should you buy the Samsung Galaxy M11? It's a bit complicated, but bear with me. If you look the under 12,000 or 11,000 price range as a whole, then this is simply not the best option. There are better things out there. Clearly, there are better offerings from Realme, Xiaomi, Vivo, etc. The Redmi Note 9 and 9 Prime are fantastic offerings which gives you a lot for not much price. The Redmi 9 Prime will even save you Rs 30,000 as it starts at only 9,999. The Poco M2 is a great deal if you're somebody who is more performance based. On the Realme side of things, the Narzo 20 series is actually a great set of phones. You could also try last year's Realme 5S and Realme 5i. If all these are fantastic offerings, then why did I say that the decision is going to be complicated? Because the Samsung Galaxy M11 is the only good non-Chinese phones in the under 12k price range. Here are the other ones. The Nokia 6.1 is better compared to the M11 in terms of chipset, since it has a Snapdragon 636, but it has inferior camera, inferior battery and a laggy software. The LG W30 has superior chipset in the form of Helio P22, but again it has a laggy software and not enough battery. You could save yourself some money and go for the Samsung Galaxy M01, but it has chunkier bezels, micro USB, an inferior chipset and also a lower battery capacity. But if you're willing to pay Rs 2000 more, then going for the Samsung Galaxy M21 is quite possibly the best option, whose main attraction is a 1080p AMOLED display. So if you can pay 2000 more, then definitely go for that. But if you can't, this sort of is your only good non-Chinese option. So if you want the maximum value for money for your hard-earned money, then obviously you will have to go for the Chinese option. But if you don't want to go for a non-Chinese option, which I absolutely respect, then sadly this phone is your only choice. The Samsung Galaxy M11 makes more sense for somebody like our elders, somebody like our parents or grandparents, who doesn't need the most technologically advanced phones. They just need a good software, decent battery and also some amount of storage. Anyway, that's it for today. Hope you liked it. Thanks for watching and I'll see you next week. But not on the speaker. Cut that. The headphone jack, I have done a detailed camera review of the Samsung Galaxy M11, so the link for that should pop up. A dedicated